Kia ora tātou, ko Andrew Double-A tēnei. But my hunch is you probably already know that. Welcome to this workshop. We're going to consider the law book, and it's one of 4 workshops that we're running at our conference this year. I'm going to dive right in. Some may find some of the things that I'm about to say somewhat harsh and a little bit problematic. But I'm inviting you to listen. Listen with an open heart and an open mind, and see where there are points of recognition for you that we might in fact need to change how we're doing things. Our law book is rooted in colonial soil and does not adequately express the treaty honouring commitment our church has called into and that the church has made. We have not long ago completed a protracted disciplinary process. The QC, who we had employed, on being pressed, commented, "Well, yes, you have a very Pākehā disciplinary process. There's no doubt about that." I wrote it down verbatim, so I'm just quoting what she said. The tragedy is that our disciplinary processes are among the more recent improvements in the law book. In many ways, the law book, I want to suggest, is a hodgepodge of adaptations and bolted on bits that have been added over the decades as the church has changed. I'm advocating that it's no longer fit for purpose as we move deeper into the 3rd decade of the 21st century. So, are we going to continue to tinker with it, or take a fresh look at who we are now and what structures and laws we need as we seek to chart our course into the future? While it's true that our law book embraces the English history of the church, with its deep roots in the person and teachings of John Wesley, and locks in place such concepts as connectionalism and the itineracy of the ministry, there are real questions on how well this is serving us and our mission today. And that's surely the role of the law book, to serve the church and its mission, not the other way round. A bit like Jesus when he said that the Sabbath was made for human beings, not human beings made for the Sabbath. The law book needs to serve our needs, not be the slave master governing and structuring our life and mission. While we have no creed, we do have the sermons and notes of John Wesley, and while in theory we're required to give assent to their teachings, this is given little more than a nod and a wink, but it's still significant in the law book. It reminds me of a little story of an incident that happened all those years ago when I was at theological college. It was St John's Trinity, so we were combined with the Anglicans. And after, on the Wednesday mornings, we would have separate classes. They would go to their Anglicanism class, we would go to our Methodism class. And on this particular day, one of the Anglican students who was coming toward ordination and was looking to her assessment asked the lecturer the question. She said, "We have these 39 articles which I'm required to give assent to. What am I going to do? Because I don't think that I believe them, certainly not all of them. And there's parts that I really struggle with. What am I going to do so that I can do this with some form of integrity?" And the lecturer responded, "Well," he said, "if I were you, I would give verbal assent, but with mental reservations." And my friend was pretty quick off the mark. He looked at him and said, "Well," he says, "I wouldn't buy a used car from you." Herein lies one of the problems. We've got the teachings of a man, and I think in many ways a genius, but they're rooted in the 18th century. And I'm not sure that there would be too many of us that would want to embrace everything he's thought and said and taught and held to be the case. That's just one of the little problems that I think we've got as a holdover that we may need to look at. The church law book sets out the structure of the church, its national, regional and local structures, its departments, its standing committees, its officers, how the church will run, its disciplinary process down to the minutiae of its procedures. Yet, like Frankenstein's monster, it increasingly looks like something cobbled together from a series of spare parts bins, hoping that it will do the job. Now, there will be those who, I said, will think that I'm being overly harsh and dramatic. Part of our problem, and we're seeing it clearer day by day, is that our church put a moratorium on restructuring around the turn of the century, about 20 years ago. Restructuring fatigue had set in. 20 years later, the church has shrunk and its constituency has significantly changed, with a dramatic bias in numbers toward Pacifica. And the world in which we live has changed and continues to change at a bewildering and almost unbelievable pace. Yet we retain the same structures, the same ways of doing and being, with virtually no revision in the intervening 20 years. The church of 2000 would struggle to recognise the world in which we now live, or the church as it now is. What hasn't changed is our structures and law book, and I'm not sure that they any longer serve us as well as they need to. It's time for a fresh start. Perhaps we could first establish our priorities as a treaty-honouring missional church, and rebuilding our structures around our priorities so that the structures of the church serve its mission. We need to take a leaf out of the old America's Cup assessment tool. When looking at everything they did, they asked the question, will it make the boat go faster? For us, will it enhance, promote, drive the mission of God and the church? This will not be an overnight wonder. It may take a good number of years to get it looking in the way that we think is actually going to work for us and moving toward it. It may be transitional. I have no idea, but I believe we need to change. We start by resolving to change. Perhaps establish an initial creative, courageous and clear-eyed focus group to scope out the change, reporting what it might start to look like to Conference 2022. What a great year, 200 years in Aotearoa, and we're actually having a fresh look at who we are and where we're going and how we're going to get there. And a wee bit like the 12 who spied out the promised land in Numbers 13, I expect there will be a fairly strong pushback. Rather than looking how we might institute change, the greatest risk we will face, in my opinion, will come from those who insist that to change is too risky, too radical in denying our Methodist roots, and probably not necessary anyway. It may be suggested we might just need to tinker a little more. Friends, the days of tinkering, I want to suggest, are past. As president, I'm caught in significant cognitive dissonance as I seek to establish who I am and my place as president in the church. This is a lively issue for me. It's because we've tinkered. We've bolted on bodies like the Council of Conference, which, a bit like the presidency, lives in a kind of twilight zone, unsure of the extent of its roles and responsibilities. It all seemed like such a good idea at the time, and it still could be. We need an integrated, pared down, nimble set of structures and procedures, ready to change and be changed as circumstances demand it. The weight of the current law book, like a giant albatross around our necks, will one day simply choke us as we seek to hold it up as the core reason for our existence. Let's start again from scratch.